cancelled, a short story written and narrated by Robert Fairhead from the Tall and True writers' website. The shitstorm hit the Twitter fan overnight. Demon had thought his followers would laugh at his sarcastic tweet. He'd watched a news clip about refugees from a COVID-ravaged continent, and before setting aside his phone for the night, he'd retweeted it with a tongue-out emoji. Let them eat COVID in their own country. LOL. But when Demon checked his phone first thing in the morning, he found he'd been ratioed on Twitter. His tweet had thousands of angry face emoji replies and very few likes and retweets. Social media rivals led the backlash. You'd be sorry if this was you and your mother, one responded. Demon hadn't seen his mum in ages, and not because of COVID. She'd embarrassed him, calling him Dennis in front of strangers. It's Demon, remember? He'd exploded. And since then, he'd been the rotten apple of his mum's eye, and they'd rarely spoken on the phone. Nah, lol, Demon tweeted back to his rival with a middle finger emoji. However, he was worried. Demon was a mid-tier Instagram influencer, and Twitter wasn't his primary source of social media income. But being ratioed could damage his profile, especially if other rivals piled on the Twitter storm. It could spill over and affect his followers and collaboration deals on Instagram. Demon recalled a stand-up comic saying the best form of defence was to be offensive. He tweeted back with another middle finger emoji. Unlike bleeding hearts, I'm not sitting on the fence. Leave the COVID refugees in their own countries. By mid-morning, Demon was seriously concerned. The storm still raged over yesterday's tweet, and his second tweet had been ratioed too. He noticed his followers were falling off on Twitter and Instagram, and there were direct messages from his brand collaborators that Demon feared reading. Hoping to stem his losses, he deleted both tweets. However, another rival influencer had screenshot the originals and tweeted them. And fueling the storm, others had shared further harrowing news of COVID refugees, tagging Demon in their tweets with angry face emojis and shame and cancel hashtags. The shitstorm over his tweets trended for 48 hours. Demon didn't leave his apartment or tweet and post to social media. No one called or texted him, not even his mum, and the tweets and messages on Twitter and Instagram were overwhelmingly hostile with swearing face emojis. Demon had some supporters. Right-wing shock jocks and commentators quoted him in rants about the evils of political correctness, cancel culture, and COVID refugees. And neo-Nazi nationalists expressed solidarity with thumbs up and OK sign emoji posts. On the third morning, Demon woke to find the storm had finally abated. He was no longer trending, but most of his followers on Twitter and Instagram, and all of his collaborators, had deserted him. Demon stared at his phone in shock and disbelief. As swift as the COVID pandemic, he'd been cancelled on social media and was no longer a mid-tier influencer. Demon felt sick, like a refugee in his own country, and he felt sorry. Hi, I'm Robert Fairhead from Tall and True Short Reads and the Tall and True Writers website. Cancelled was my May 2021 entry for the Australian Writers Centre's 500-word short story competition, Furious Fiction. The story had to be set in a storm, it had to include the words mother, apple and yesterday, and contain the phrase sitting on the fence. Instead of a stormy night or a stormy relationship, I set the short story in a shitstorm on Twitter. The news in April and May was full of the growing tragedy of the COVID Delta outbreak in India, and Australians were divided over our government's decision to ban Indian Australians from returning home under the threat of heavy fines and imprisonment. The debate over the Indian travel ban was fiercest on social media, and judging by the posts and tweets, empathy was in shorter supply than toilet paper had been during the start of the COVID pandemic and lockdowns. I wrote a short story about Demon, aka Dennis to his mum, a mid-tier Instagram influencer whose late-night tweet about COVID refugees backfires. In the morning, Demon finds he's been ratioed on Twitter. The negative replies to his tweet vastly outnumber likes or retweets. Fearing a spillover effect on his primary source of income, Instagram, Demon makes matters worse by tweeting again. Followers and collaborators desert him, and having been cancelled on social media, Demon is left feeling like a refugee in his own country, and sorry for himself. Please note, this story draws on my observations of the news and social media and my imagination at the time of writing. It is not about the COVID Delta outbreak in India or Australia's response, but the story does consider a time and place where we may need to show more compassion for COVID refugees. I hope you enjoyed listening to Cancelled. You can read all my short stories, blog posts and other writing at tallandtrue.com. You can also buy my short story collections from the Amazon Kindle and Kobo online bookstores. Links are available in the show notes. In the meantime, don't forget to check your feed or the podcast website, tallandtrueshortreads.com, for earlier episodes from seasons 1 and 2. And follow or subscribe to the podcast and rate and review it via your favourite app. Doing so helps me share my writing with other listeners. And finally, please support this podcast by telling your family and friends about Tall and True Short Reads and the Tall and True Writers website.